In this video, I'm going to be covering the whole entire market in terms of Nasdaq, Dow Jones, S&P 500, and I'm going to cover the economic calendar, 10-year treasury. I do post these videos daily, so if you want to be notified when I do upload the latest video on X or YouTube, consider following. And also, I'd highly recommend you checking the latest video because these could be out of date. First, I'm going to go over the economic calendar, then I'll come back to the analysis, and then I'll do the 10-year treasury actually too before I do the analysis. So in terms of Tuesday, June 4th, at 10 a.m. we have factory orders and jobs openings coming up in terms of data. One thing to note as well is next week we have CPI and PPI inflation numbers, which is important for the market because they're curious if the Fed will cut interest rates this year. Now for the 10-year treasury, we're at 4.392%. And in terms of the Dow Jones and basically S&P 500 and Nasdaq, for the short term, they're all showing upside. And then for the long term, they're kind of showing downside. Doesn't necessarily mean, but like in terms of long term, the markets always tend to go up overall for the long haul. But long term, more like the next few months or whatever, and so on and so forth. In terms of like, let's say the next 6 months is downside, right? That's more like for the longer term aspects. But I'm going to show it here. So this is dating back since 2021, and this upward trend resistance line. And then when I zoom in here, upward trend support level 2 as well. And when I zoom in here, you'll see that these two have more than just one touch point. 1, 2, 3, 4 touch points. And we saw resistance obviously dating back since 2021. But then we have an upward trend support level. Didn't necessarily hit this upward trend support level dating back since 2021, but it looks like it's heading up to the upside. Because if we look at 6 month, 3 month, and 1 month, this is the MAC line showing the upward, if it's bearish or bullish movement. We're currently in the bullish movement, and again, this applies to 3 month and 1 month as well, and it's just curving up even more of a bullish movement. You can see the green ticks are solid green ticks, and doesn't mean it's going to just be straight going to the upside. There will obviously be down days or down moments in the market like we saw today. The market went down and then went back up. And then ultimately, I think what seems like we're stuck in this channel where we're just going to go up here and then probably come back down again. And if you were curious what that price point is for the Dow Jones, currently we're at 38,571 points. And that's basically, depending on when we hit it, it's roughly about 40,152 points, give or take. But again, depends on when we hit it. If we hit it later, it's going to be higher. In terms of moving averages, as resistance, basically, first resistance is pretty much where we're at right now anyway, about 38,556 points. Then it's the next moving average is 38,688 points, 38,921 points, and 39,259 points. In terms of support, in case you think we're coming down and bouncing off this, we're looking at support potentially at 38,055 points. Again, these are just ballpark. Could just be 38,000 clean, by the way. Now, in terms of, I'm going to go over the QQQ, or actually I'll go over SPY first, SPY, which is ETF for S&P 500. And for this one, again, like I stated, in terms of 5-year chart and 1-year chart, which is the same as the Dow Jones too, by the way. I'll just show it here for the S&P. It's showing, for example, in the bearish movement. So it technically hasn't recovered to go to the upside, hypothetically, for the long term. And then even the 1-year chart, it's still in the bearish movement, right? But now for the 6 month, 3 month, and 1 month, they're showing to the upside. So yeah, for the 3 month, it hasn't crossed over fully. It could get knocked down. That is a potential, but it's really close to crossing over to a bullish movement and go to the upside fully. Now I'm going to cover the upside and downside regardless anyway, but we have this downward trend resistance line, broke through it, somewhat bounced around the same area. We're approaching resistance at the moving average, which kind of coincides with the moving in terms of resistance levels horizontally, and I'll go over that soon. But resistance at $528.25. Right now we're at $527.80, so approaching it. But at the same time, we have extreme difficulties passing the $530, $531, $532 price point. You can see horizontally right here. Actually, not $532 exactly, but it's $531 and some change. So I'll just draw it out just for two seconds. It's not a great illustration, but you get the idea. Hopefully, touch point, touch point, touch point, touch point, multiple resistance levels. And this is roughly about $531 and some change. So that is going to be the first big milestone to really pass, to be honest, let alone 530. But the 528 with the moving average, the 530 in general, and then the 531 and some change, that's going to be hard to get past. Once we pass that, then we have to pretty much, for the most part, pass the all-time high of $534, right? Now, to the downside, we have potentially resistance with the moving average of $526.43, give or take, $524.62, which coincides with the horizontal support level / resistance level. You can see pretty much diagonally here anyway, besides the other points of the chart. But right about here is support, right about here is resistance. So about $525 in general, 524 and some change is support and resistance. Then we have this downward trend resistance line that could act as support, which we pretty much hovered around it anyway. You're looking at $523.23. Now, the thing is, though, then we get into the channel between 518 to 522. Between 518 and 522, just like we saw the other day, the 518 acts as support. Quick drop right here, quick drop right here, and that was always in the 518 and some change range. So between 518 to 522, there is support, but it's like a support channel where we could consolidate between that. I haven't seen the consolidation yet between it fully, but there has been a time period, like actually right about here. So 522 right here and 518, and pretty much consolidated. You could argue it was between 519 to 522, but I've seen multiple times it just drops to 518 and bounces back up potentially. You would hope so, at least. Now for the QQQ, same thing applies, like I stated. 5-year chart, 1-year chart, long term, more downside hypothetically. But for the short term, right now, for the 6, 3, and 1 month, it's showing bullish movement to the upside or reversal to the upside. Now for the Nasdaq, it's showing predominantly more for the upside. It is actually in the green versus the S&P 500. And we have this downward trend resistance line. I'm going to show the 5-year chart because for this one, it's kind of important because we're approaching the limit. This dates back since 2010. Same with the S&P 500. Upward trend resistance line, upward trend support level. The only thing is, though, for S&P 500, it did not break through it, but for this Nasdaq, it did. So 2020 to 2022, it broke through, but then we got underneath it again. And heading back up, and the question is, will we get past it or not? Technically got close to it again, but did not pass it, and potentially heading back up to test it. Now, for the upper limits, let's just say if you think it's just going to spike up, we're going to have issues passing about $447 price point. Right now, we're at $453.13. And in terms of the basic levels, first to the upside, we have 2 moving averages colliding, so that's going to be difficult to pass to begin with. About $454, $455, which coincides with the horizontal resistance anyway. And then 455 and some changes as well as resistance. And then we're pretty much approaching all the multiple levels. So basically 458, then the 460, and then we approach the all-time high above 461, 462. So those basically passing 462 would be a difficult task on its own just to begin with. So there's that for the upside. Now in terms of support, we do have support. Technically, it was upward trend resistance / support level. I'll show soon at the 452, then the 451, which at the 450 we have support as well. And then we just start trickling down to, where was it, right about here, I think it was 448. And then we could potentially end up coming back down to 443. But first there was 445 as well, support. But it all depends on these levels, 447. But I think we would bounce off, to be honest, at the 443, 442. I just don't think we're heading down, so that's why I'm not really too focused on the downside personally. But there's multiple support levels regardless. And ultimately, I think if we hit 443, we bounce again, just like we saw the other day, because we see a lot of consolidation right about here, plus that touch point right there. But in terms of what I want to show, in terms of upward trend support, resistance, you can see right here, resistance, support, 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 or resistance, resistance, and then support right there. And we saw pretty much a resistance right about here. So that's the resistance / support that could happen, about 453. But then right about here, the downtrend resistance line that could act as support, and it's about $448. But yeah, that's basically it for today's video. Thanks again for watching. I appreciate it. If you do find it beneficial, consider dropping a like. It does help the channel. So thank you so much for that. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.